I'll play a couple of sound bites that, I don't know, maybe we should pay attention to. Here's cut 2, Joe Biden.
What made you change your mind and decide to give them these weapons?
Two things, Fareed, and it was a very difficult decision on my part. And by the way, I discussed this with our allies, discussed this with our friends up on the Hill, and we're in a situation where Ukraine continues to be brutally attacked across the board by munitions, by these cluster munitions that have dud rates that are very, very low, very high, that are dangerous to civilians, number one. Number two, the Ukrainians are running out of ammunition. But the main thing is they either have the weapons to stop the Russians now keep them from stopping the Ukrainian offensive through these areas, or they don't. And I think they needed them.
So, okay, great. So what is a cluster bomb? Let me just refresh your memory in case you don't know. It's a bomb almost in some ways like a intercontinental ballistic missile when it has little nukes inside or little bombs inside that kind of spray out and go to different places, except a cluster bomb just kind of scrapes this whole area. It has many little bombs in it, so when it opens up before impact, they all kind of hit in a general area. The reason why, as he mentioned there, that they are so obscene is because many of them don't go off, and so kids will later be in a field and they'll go, ooh, what's this? And pick it up and it'll blow up. They are condemned by almost all of the world. In fact, Jen Psaki condemned the use of cluster bombs. Listen to her. Cut 18, please.
There are reports of illegal cluster bombs and vacuum bombs being used by the Russians. If that's true, what is the next step of this administration, and is there a red line for how much violence will be tolerated against civilians in this manner that's illegal and potentially a war crime?
It would be. I don't have any confirmation of that. We have seen the reports.
Would be a war crime.
If that were true, it would potentially be a war crime. Obviously, there are a range of international fora that would assess that. So certainly we would look to that to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah. And that stops being a war crime when Ukraine is out of ammunition. And does that really help Ukraine for the president to say they're out of ammunition? I mean, that's, that seems kind of dangerous in and of itself. I mean, doesn't it? Here he is, cut 19, ammunition stocks.
Number one. Number two, the Ukrainians are running out of ammunition. The ammunition that they call them 155 millimeter weapons. This is a war relating to munitions, and they're running out of that ammunition, and we're low on it.
Oh, good. Okay, so they're out of it, and we're low on it. Oh, okay. Stu, thoughts?
Glenn, I would use the term suboptimal to describe that particular commentary.
You know, may I follow that with, it's going to be interesting to see how all this works out, isn't it?
Yeah, it really would be interesting to see how all of this works out. You know, it's fascinating to, I keep coming back to the idea that we should not be talking about this stuff at all. Like, they keep describing in detail all of these things that we're doing as if it's an intentional, a bite at the apple to start a world war. As if, like, our big goal here is to get this one started. That's the opposite of my goal.
Yes. Could we just play back again? Just listen to the question to Jen Psaki that I just played to highlight what you just said. Cut 18.
There are reports of illegal cluster bombs and vacuum bombs being used by the Russians. If that's true, what is the next step of this administration?
Could we stop? There are reports, and if that's true, you don't. She didn't say President Putin just announced he's using cluster bombs. Okay, President Biden It's not a report. They don't have to say, well, maybe that's what they're doing. United States is distancing themselves from what is said to be cluster bombs. No, we said we're sending them over. Hello?
Yeah, it's not. Vladimir Putin did an interview with moronic CNN personality Fareed Zakaria explaining to him why we're sending munitions banned in over 100 countries to their enemies. Like, that's not that way that works in any other place. I don't know why we're doing that.
Unbelievable.
It should be one of those things that they're saying, hey, where did the Ukrainians get these cluster munitions if we were going to give them to them at all, of course.
Isn't it weird that the headlines that you see overseas all revolve around Ukraine and China? Now, let's just think this through. Ukraine, Hunter Biden. China, Hunter Biden. Look at what we're doing all of the time. Let me play Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen in China. Here she's walking in to meet President Xi. Oh, and she's bowing. Oh, honorable one. Yeah, can we grab her so she's not bowing? Can we possibly do that? By the way, you have the president yesterday talking about China and saying that he had a moment with President Xi, and it was very important because he wanted to make sure that they understood they're in dangerous territory. They're in dangerous territory. Didn't you just put a global coalition of countries together to work against fentanyl? And the number one maker of fentanyl, China, is not a part of that? Oh, I bet they're very afraid. Be afraid. Be very, very afraid. So here's what he said. The Biden administration went over and he talked to President Xi, and he said, I told President Xi, and I'm quoting, "This is not a threat. This is an observation. But since Russia went to Ukraine," I'm quoting, "600 American corporations have pulled out from Russia. And since you told me that your country depends on investment from Europe and the United States, be careful. Be very, very careful. This is not a threat. It's an observation." Gee, that sounds like a threat to me. Sure sounds like one. And what leader of any country would be a responsible leader if he didn't then say after that meeting, the president just said we should be careful. Let's make sure our banking systems are not tied and dependent on the United States. Now, maybe he wasn't threatening. He was wink, wink, nod, nod. Here's your opportunity, Z. I'm going to sound like I'm tough, but I'm helping you accomplish what you need to accomplish. Because after all, my family got $40 million from you guys. I sold the American people out for 12 cents a head. Ha 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 ha. How great.
It's incredible. It really is incredible when you look at it this way. Of course, any country that is being threatened like this would take action and should be planning to take action to defend against some crazy president in another country that might do something nuts. And, I will also say, Glenn, the threat of 600 companies leaving Russia, if anything, we've found, I would argue, that the impact was less than expected from that action, right?
Yes. Yes.
I know all the Chuck E. Cheeses in Russia shut down, but it didn't seem to do all that much to their economy.
Stu, you have to remember too. This is what's driving the dollar into oblivion. This is what's driving the gold standard. We've lost more value in our dollar over the last 2 years than we did over the previous 20 years. Okay? Our dollar was like 80%, something like that, of all global reserve currency back in 2000. By 2020, I think it was at 49% or 53%. It's now at 43%. We're killing ourselves. We're killing ourselves. that when we took that action in Russia and said, we're not going to give you access to SWIFT, what do you think Russia did? They went to China, they went to all of the other countries that depend on us right now and say, hey, do you trust the United States? Well, I don't know. They can be kind of wishy-washy at times. I'm not sure I agree with them all the time, but I have to. Good. We're coming up with a new program that will replace SWIFT so all of the transactions can go through us and don't have to worry about the United States. When you say something like that to China, you've pushed Xi into a corner as a responsible leader of any nation. I don't care if he's a dictator or not. Any nation that a leader would not say, hey, we got to get off of this.
Yeah,
is crazy.
These dynamics play out in all of these countries, right? There's always a harder core faction that is pushing to say, no, don't do any business with them. Let's start our own thing. Let's go around them. And you empower those people when you act this way. Sometimes you can't avoid it, right? I mean, these are not always easy issues, but you look, every time you go back to the foundation of all of these problems, it's basically you're asking Joe Biden and the people around him, Antony Blinken, to be able to navigate these waters successfully. And over and over again, they show that they are only capable of sinking ships. That is all they can do. They cannot navigate waters. They're terrible at this. And we have our future in their hands, which, to tie it into your new book, Dark Future comes to mind.
Well, let me give you this. We're talking about the banking system and everything that's changing. And let me just give you a little bright piece of sunshine here, Stu. The Postal Service is now thinking about getting into the financial service sector. Postal banking. The government says the post office could help reach unbanked and underbanked people in rural and urban communities. Mainstream financial institutions and predatory lenders often take advantage of underbanked Americans with high fees or interest rates to keep them in a cycle of poverty. But as families across the country try to recover from the economic crisis, establishing a postal banking pilot program would ensure these communities have financially safe and reliable banking services. This isn't asking you to put your full faith and credit and trust into the United States of America. It's asking you to put it into the United States of America and the post office. That doesn't sound like a winner to me.